Thank you. It's wonderful to be here in TEDxSanPedroSula. Actually, truthfully, it's a little out of my comfort zone. I don't speak Spanish. I'm used to the island life after so many years on Roatan, and used to going barefoot, not having a cell phone, etc. But where I'm most comfortable is going into areas where no people have ever been before, specifically into mountains and jungles where most people would call it impenetrable jungle, or deep in the ocean, as deep as half a mile, in vehicles I've built myself. So many of you are familiar with Pico Bonito as seen from La Ceiba. This is the view that you see from a helicopter on the other side of the mountain, which is actually much more spectacular than the other side. There is a 4,000-foot tall chain of waterfalls that goes from 7,000 to 3,000 feet. And this summer, a friend and I climbed the mountain from the other side and then came down using ropes and mountain climbing gear. And we spent 20 days in there. The red dot shows where a campsite is. This is a photo taken from that campsite. We both agreed, despite all our hiking and backpacking experience, this was the most spectacular campsite we ever found, which was added to by being greeted by a troop of over 20 monkeys, the clouds parting, which is very rare when you're above the cloud forest line, and finding dry wood for a fire, which is also very rare when you're that far into the cloud forest. So we also noticed that while we were up there, from so many different points, we could see this one large waterfall on the other side of the valley, which is circled in this photo. And we decided to try to get to the top of that on the way out. This is leaving that waterfall. The next morning, we had to rappel down 180 meters with, we didn't have rope that long, so you basically have to go, make another anchor, go again. But, so this is the view across that valley looking back at the previous campsite, standing on the top of a 90-meter waterfall. So the reason I open with slides of a jungle mountain setting, despite one is that that's all in Honduras too, but I think it illustrates well the difficulty of getting into areas on this planet on land where people haven't been before. Basically, if you had to estimate, I would say much less than 1% of the land part of this planet has not been seen or explored by humans before. However, if you're talking about the ocean, that's exactly the opposite case. The technology to go into the ocean any significant distance has only been around for 50 or 60 years. Scuba gear and manned submersibles. Now, I need to differentiate between military submarines and the kind of submarine that I operate. Military submarines, there are more of them. They've spent many more hours down there, but they don't have windows and they're traveling at speed. They don't really have any understanding of what their surroundings are. The kind of vehicle that I'm operating is small, battery-powered, and meant to explore at a slow pace and actually understand the surroundings. So this map shows all the vehicles in the world at the time that are able to go 1,500 feet or deeper, and there are very few of them. And it's a reason that primarily of expense, and there's only a couple first world governments that have stepped up and actually invested in this technology. And actually the heyday for that kind of investment is fading. There's only one country that's actually increased their manned underwater programs recently, and that is China. They recently built a submarine that is now the deepest operating one in the world, and it can go 7,500 meters. Every other country has either diminished or never had a program to begin with. For example, just to give you an idea of the scarcity of the vehicle that I'm operating in Roatan, it's the deepest diving manned vehicle in the Western Hemisphere south of the United States. So it's a huge blank canvas for exploration not being done. However, what is happening is, due to the rising inequality of wealth in the world, there are more and more ultra-wealthy individuals that now have mega yachts that they're looking to outfit with whatever toys they can find. And there's no less than 6 companies at this point that are competing to put these kind of vehicles onto those mega yachts. This is an offering by a company in California. This is one that's made in Florida. And this is a vehicle that used to be owned by the French Oceanographic Institute, and they found it too expensive to operate, the French government. A US hedge fund billionaire had the money, bought it, fixed it up nicer than it ever was, put new submarines on board, and now travels the world doing film projects and selling clips to the BBC and such. So that's sort of the way that the industry has moved. So my organization is completely different than that. I have been offering the deepest trips for the public that you could buy a ticket to go on in the world for the last 14 years. And I've been doing that on Roatan, and I offer trips up to 2,000 feet. How does somebody get to be in that position? Well, when I was 9 years old, I read a short story, and I got it in my head that I wanted to build a submarine. And when you're that age and you say you want to do something like that, people aren't keen to squash your hopes and dreams yet, so everybody was encouraging, and I was gullible and young enough to believe them, so I just kept on the process, kept researching. And when I was 15, I had enough money from after-school jobs that I bought the first piece of steel, and that's me welding on it in my parents' backyard in New Jersey. So this vehicle, I finished it the same week I graduated college, and it was an original design. It has wings, and it could glide through the water without having to use motors. There are more vehicles like that now, but that was the first of that kind. And it made 556 dives, maximum of 725 feet. I operated that for 2 years off Roatan, and then I left to go do a salvage contract in Cuba. And when they dropped me back off in Florida, I realized that this had become a career of sorts, and I was going to need a bigger boat. So through a contact that I had made in Oklahoma, I moved there, holed myself up in an airport hangar for a year and a half, and made this vehicle, which is also original design and has 3 spheres of 3 different sizes. The passengers sit up front, I'm standing up in the back, and it's very useful design because you're able to both stand up, lie down. I've done over a dozen trips where I go and I park it and stay overnight, which in a other vehicle you would need it to be much larger to have the room to lie down in there. And I've been operating that in Roatan for the last 14 years. These are some shots of it going through the water. The passengers have both the 30-inch diameter window to look through and the flat window by their feet that's 19 inches diameter. So these are animals that most of the people that are aware of what they even are study fossils. They've been in the fossil record 500 million years, which, to put it in perspective, dinosaurs were 50 or 60 million years ago. They only live below 500 feet, and they are capable of walking around. They're relatives of starfish. They're very simple organisms. They're filter feeders, but they're extremely successful. They have survived pretty much everything the planet and the universe can throw at them, and they're right here. This is a limestone arch at about 1,200 feet that's covered by them. In this area, there's hundreds of these sea lilies. And this is a close-up of the limestone wall at around 400 feet. So there's a lot of discussion in the media recently about, how fast sea level is going to rise, how much it might rise, but we're talking 10 feet, 20 feet. Historically, in the geological record, that's nothing. During past ice ages, the sea level was 450 feet lower than it is now. And there's evidence of that everywhere in the world that you dive at the depths between 300 and 700 feet, because you see there's a band of limestone circling those depths that used to be the shallow water reef that has basically drowned as sea level rose. But it makes for fantastic habitat to explore. It really feels otherworldly because it started as a reef, so it grew into these fantastic shapes. And then because it's limestone, it's been dissolved into even more fantastic shapes. This is a freestanding tower of rock, maybe 50 feet high. Those corals are 2 to 3 feet across on that. Another thing that people don't really expect at those depths is the clarity of the water. You would never get that much real estate in a photo at scuba diving depths, but when you go below 300 feet or so, there's a thermocline and the water gets much, much more clear than it was shallower. It's because the wind and the waves keep the water turbulent up near the surface. So these are some of my favorite animals. These are six-gill sharks, and very few people know about them. They grow up to 18 feet long, and the submarine, for comparison, is 13 feet. And they're found mostly between 3,000 to 5,000 feet. During the day, they sometimes come up as shallow as 1,000 feet in clear waters. In dark waters, they come near the surface, but it's got to be very dark water. They don't like the light, or warm water. I've had a theory for more than 10 years that these are the most numerous large animal that we share the planet with today, besides human and their livestock. And I've done a lot of research on this. I've bounced this theory off a lot of experts, and nobody has been even able to offer an alternative species of what it might be. Because of the numbers of sharks in shallow water that have been killed for shark fin soup, hundreds of millions of sharks a year, it's reasonable to estimate that there are more than 100 million of these individuals, and they also live pretty much everywhere in the world's oceans except the far north and south pole. This is a guy you might recognize from the TV program River Monsters, Jeremy Wade. We had an 80-pound pig strapped to the sub, and we did a series of dives. And this is with a red light. The sharks don't like the very bright light, but you can see the submarine in that image, as well as the shark that came and ate the pig, which was larger than the submarine. This was a dive that I did with National Geographic, and we were able to secure a horse for bait. It was actually a very large horse, and we had 5 sharks feeding on it, and they completely ate the entire horse in a few hours. The shark was large enough that it was able to rip the leg off the horse and then swallowed it whole. There are deer on Roatan. One of my neighbors has some as pets. When one died, I did a shark dive, and we tied it by the antlers, and the shark wore itself out, coming back time and time again, and finally managed to pull the deer's body off its neck, and was large enough that it swallowed the whole deer in one bite. This is another kind of shark that actually I probably have the most hours directly observing of anybody. This is a rough shark. They live mostly below 1,500 feet, and they have 2 dorsal fins. The first one has a poisonous spine in it, and they have electromagnetic sensing organs along the bottom of their body, much like hammerhead sharks do, which you can see much better on this image looking at the shark head on. They mostly eat mollusks and little things that they dig out of the bottom. And this is the only known image of a juvenile of this species. This is a Dumbo octopus. They're almost like a cartoon to see in real life. They swim with their ears. They only live below 1,800 feet. This is the underview of it. So these are deep water corals, and they're only just beginning to get studied. And what we're learning is both exciting and grim. They think now that there's probably more area of the deep ocean covered in deep water coral than there is of shallow water reefs. However, we're probably destroying it much faster than we're learning about it because of the destructive practice of bottom trawling. To give you a sense of scale in this picture, the red starfish are about 2 feet across. This is a type of sea cucumber that can swim. It's very elegant to watch swimming. The whole top part of their body undulates. This is a chimera, which is a half shark, half ray. They also have a poisonous spike in their dorsal fin and eat things that are buried in the substrate. And this is a siphonophore. This is a jellyfish that has stinging tentacles that it can even catch small fish with and can grow over 100 feet long. And this is a jelly nose eel. So this is a multi-beam sonar map. To give you a sense of the technology involved here, a fish finder will send out a single beam of sonar. A side scan sonar sends out a wall of sonar. Multi-beam sonar is extremely expensive. It's usually only operated by oil companies or first world governments, and it's sending out an entire T of sonar beams, usually a couple hundred of them. But what that means is that it can give you an image. For example, it could show you something as small as an office desk a mile under a boat at the right resolution. So in the middle of this image, there's a satellite photo of Roatan. The orange is the 1,000-meter mark, and the blue is the 3,000-meter mark. But when you zoom in on the data that you can get from that image, you can see things like this. Those lines are only 100-foot increments, and each one of the black shadowy spots is a boulder. So basically, what happened was, so the way that map came to be, scientists that I've worked with have also worked with Google, and the boat was being relocated through the Panama Canal. The scientists put in a request, hey, this is a place we dive, could we get you to swing by and shoot that sonar and we can have a better understanding of this area that we've been doing research? They said, yeah. The boat never even made shore. They just came, did 3 passes, kept going, gave the data to the scientist, and now basically this map is in the public domain, and I have a roadmap for everywhere I want to go with my submarine, 10 miles left and right of where my base of operations is. So this is about as detailed as what that can show, but what it means, the most interesting spots to investigate are large features and boulders, because the largest obstacle to life down there is sedimentation, and there's basically a constant flow of sediment coming from the shore. So if you have a big boulder that lifts life out of that sediment flow, not only is it getting more into the current to filter feed, but it's being protected from being choked out by the sediment. So it's an extremely useful map in terms of identifying new areas. That's an aerial view of Roatan that shows just how steeply it drops off to each side. That's the #1 reason why I'm on Roatan, and it's also a huge reason why you don't see more operations like this around the world. Usually you would have to be based on a boat, and the costs go through the roof, $20,000 to $50,000 a day. The boat is actually much more expensive than the submarine in almost all instances. So the future me is going to be exploring more around the island. This is a device I made called a sub-sled, which is a one-of-a-kind invention, and it is all fiberglass and composite, and the submarine docks into it. It has 3 ballast compartments, and basically makes the sub more hydrodynamic to tow. The problem is the submarine can only go about 1 mile an hour on its batteries, and when you tow it, you can only go about 3 miles an hour, but then when you get to where you're going, you have the problem of getting in and out of the submarine if there are any kind of waves that can be dangerous. But when it's docked with this sled, the characteristics change. It's much more stable to get in and out, and it also tows at double the speed. There it is underway. And there's my logo. The future, what I would like to say is that I think that the submersible world is very small, and so it's easy to see trends maybe better than in a bigger universe. And what I see happening with the submersible world is very disturbing in that we have 70% of the planet that used to be, it's still an unknown wilderness. And it used to be something that governments, that we were investigating as a society, but now it's basically, that is diminishing, and it's becoming almost exclusively the domain of mining companies, oil companies, and a private playground for the ultra-rich to tool around in. So we have to all work to make a more equal society and have the exploration of still 2/3 of our planet be something that we all share in. Thank you.